What's up, everybody? Thanks for tuning in today because I think I'm going to have some fun with this video. As you can maybe tell from what I have going on here on the table in front of me, we're going to be diving back into the world of XOC, or extreme overclocking. Now, I know other channels have gone bigger or done it with crazier cooling setups, but today I'll be trying to push our hardware farther than I ever have personally done before, and we'll be doing so with the help of a new product from Enermax, the MaxRevo 1800 watt power supply, a unit so massive that my puny American outlets may not be able to handle it. It's time to find out. Before we dive in, I want to give a thank you to Enermax for sponsoring this video and allowing me to showcase their new monster power supply in the most fun way possible by trying to overwhelm it while overclocking the snot out of some absurd hardware. When they got in contact with me and said that they wanted to feature a video on a power supply, I wasn't sure I was going to be able to accommodate them. I mean, after all, power supplies are inherently kind of boring. But when I started thinking about just what I could use a power supply like this for, I thought back to the last time I did some XOC work in January where I fried a $500 X299 dark motherboard because I was powering it with two separate units. I ran the idea by Enermax and they were all about it and gladly sent over this beast for testing. When doing any kind of XOC work, maybe the single most important component of your rig is the power supply, after all. You need clean, consistent power to your CPU and your GPU, and you need to have at least a little wattage headroom so your entire rig just doesn't shut down on you. While this MaxRevo unit is rated for 1800 watts, that's with a 220 volt outlet. If you plug it into a 110 like we have here in the States, you instead get 1600 watts, which might be cutting it close with the hardware we'll be using today, but we can still give it a go. It also uses 6 separate 12 volt rails to help carry the current. Additionally, because we'll be so heavily loading the MaxRevo for a long period of time, heat buildup can lead to inefficient operation. That's why I'll be running it with the turbo switch engage, which will crank up the fan and keep the PCB and capacitors nice and cool. But enough about the power supply. What will we be working with today? Well, the last time I tried this, I used a 7980XE and got some pretty good results. This time we'll be stepping down the cores to 14, but starting with a huge leg up as my impossible to find 9990XE comes clocked at 5 GHz all cores right out of the box. This also means that it draws about 450 watts in stock configuration. To help heat transfer, I've also lapped it to both smooth out the IHS to an almost mirror finish while evening out any uneven areas, which there was a large one of right in the middle. To cool this crazy chip, I have connected up a custom water loop to a radiator sitting down in a bucket of ice water with 2 pond pumps moving water across the radiator fins. If you attempt this at home, be sure to account for the condensation that will likely form on your tubing like we've done here, also on the blocks and on the radiators. For our GPUs, we've got two 2080 Ti's. The first is an EVGA for the Win 3 model that I have shunt modded to try to increase the power limit a little bit. The second is another rare gem, the Asus RG Matrix Platinum. This is the 2080 Ti with the built-in AIO, and on top of that, I've installed an XOC BIOS that completely removes the power limit entirely. We'll be cooling them with an AC unit connected to a separate circuit. To monitor our power draw, I'll be using a kilowatt that the MaxRevo will be plugged directly into. It's actually back behind this desk. To kick it off, let's just leave everything stock and see what kind of score we get in TimeSpy Extreme, as well as how much power we're actually pulling. So our first test is pretty interesting actually, because TimeSpy doesn't have a portion of the test where it's loading both the CPU and the GPU at 100% at the same time. So when the GPUs were loaded, they were pulling over 1,000 watts, and when the CPU was loaded, it was pulling over 500 watts, but we never saw those two combined. So as long as we keep the power within that range, even after overclocking, then we shouldn't have any issues at all. We even have quite a bit of headroom. But our first run all stock settings gave us a score of 12,985, and that's a graphics score of 14,044 and a CPU score of 9,099. Now, the CPU score is what's really holding us back here versus our previous attempts at this, where we were scoring like over 11,000 by having 18 cores at 5 gigahertz as opposed to just 14. But now we're going to start to work on things. Next up, let's engage the turbo mode of the MaxRevo, as we'll be upping our draw significantly from here out. This does make things a bit louder as the fans spin at about 3,100 RPM, but if cool is the name of the game, this is how you achieve it. We'll start off with a CPU overclock on just the 9990 XE and go from there. So here's an issue that I'm facing. I can get this chip up to 5.4 gigahertz honestly without much of a problem, but in order to do so, and I have it boot into Windows and run any kind of test, I have to have it at 1.5 volts. So that means that when we do run a test, these temperatures that are sitting right now in the single digits mostly, they go up pretty significantly and pretty quickly, and as a result, we don't sit at 5.4 gigahertz when we're running our tests. It'll drop all the way down. Let me run a test and show you guys. So here's our run, 8563. You notice that it's lower than our stock run, and we were pulling almost 700 watts from the wall while that test was running. And you can see that the frequencies, the minimum frequencies, which is this second column, were actually well below where our overclock was, and this is not due to any kind of AVX offset or anything like that. I mean, at most the AVX offset would be taking 300 megahertz off this, but I have AVX offset set to 0 right now, so it shouldn't be taking anything off, and we're still running at, had some cores running at 3.9 gigahertz. The temperatures still, they maxed out at 65, 75, 76, nothing too extreme, but I wonder what exactly is causing this huge dip, and maybe somebody out there can help me out and let me know. But as a result, I haven't gotten a single test to complete with any kind of overclock applied that is higher than our stock settings, which is really bizarre. So let me keep trying, I guess. Now let's try just overclocking the GPUs, see what scores that gives us, and see how much it increases the power draw. One of the benefits of using a power supply like this is that you can dedicate a separate 8-pin EPS cable to each of the GPU's power inputs here. You don't have to worry about running out of cables and having to use the daisy chain feature, because you can attach up to 6 of them, and they're fully modular, meaning that you don't have to have a giant cable mess while doing so, even though right now we kind of have a giant cable mess. So sorry, EnerMax, it is not your fault. So with what I'll call a safe GPU overclock, plus 125 on the core of both cards, plus 1,000 on the memory of both cards, voltage slider all the way up, and the fans cranked, we improved our graphics score significantly, but we're pulling over 1,200 watts from the wall from just the GPUs. We did end up with a score of 13,859, thanks almost entirely to our improved graphics score of 15,279. Let's see if we can get that up even higher by pushing the overclocks on these GPUs. So on this run, increased our memory offset to 1,200 megahertz, got our graphics score up to 15,460. And just for reference, this is my previous high score. I know this is janky looking at it on my phone, but this is from back in January, and my graphics score that I got the high score with was 14,965. So we're like 500 points higher on graphics score already, and it's just a matter of getting this CPU score of 9,077 up anywhere near this 11,110. So doing this, we pushed past 1,300 watts on the graphics cards, which is crazy. But the MaxRevo, despite it being pretty loud right now because the fan is cranked, it's doing really well. So definitely happy with it. And all right, let's see what else we can do. Okay, well, I guess there's just one thing left to do now. Crank up the overclocks on everything and let her rip. So while I still have, I guess, a little bit of ice left in that ice bucket, it is melting pretty quickly. I'm just gonna go for it. We're swapping back in the 7980XE, going for the full 18 cores. Maybe we could get it to 5.1, 5.2 gigahertz and see what kind of records we could break. Well, we at least broke one record, and that is power draw. We drew over 800 watts from the wall with just the CPU overclock. So let's run the whole system, and hopefully we get a score that breaks our previous best. Well, we have set a new personal best, but I want to give it one more try. We hit 14,293, which isn't much of an improvement from where we were before, and the CPU score is abnormally low, so I'm gonna give it one more try. So 14,485, we were able to get up a little bit higher, another 200 points or so. CPU score still a little disappointing, only 10,162. Didn't quite get up to the 11,000 and change that we had when we were doing our previous XOC stuff, but our graphics scores remained excellent, and the amount of wattage we were pulling out of the wall also remained extremely high. So yeah, everything went pretty well, I think. 14,485, no hiccups, and we did it all with one power supply. That guy right there. So there's the rig. This thing is sweating like crazy. All kinds of condensation on the tubing and whatnot. But we're almost out of ice. In fact, I think we are out of ice. So it's time to wrap this video up. So I want to give a big thank you once again to EnerMax for sponsoring this video, letting me play around with some ridiculous hardware with one of their awesome power supplies. The MaxRevo 1800 watt might not be your next power supply. It is a little bit overkill for basically everything, but it's definitely at home in some kind of a server or even a mining rig if those things still exist. And with that turbo switch, I mean, I didn't run into any problems at all running my XOC stuff, no matter how much power I was drawing. So big ups to EnerMax for putting out a good product. And once again, thank you so much for sponsoring this video. And we broke a record, or at least our own personal record. And maybe we'll try again at some point in the future. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I will see you next time.